Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. I'm glad you could join me for this episode. I'm going to just give a little warning on this episode in that I am probably not going to be my upbeat, most cheery version of myself in this episode because of what I am going to talk about today. But I do think it is important to be able to share kind of what's going on in the conference and what's happening, and for you to know that if you ever have questions or would like to have conversations about what's been going on, that I'm more than happy to visit with you and to help try to make sense of these things for you, knowing that they are multi-leveled, multifaceted, and long time coming things that we are dealing with right now. Many of you probably already know who watch this that the United Methodist Church has been in a debate for a long time, and I think probably just in an outright fight for some over the topic of homosexuality. And I want to say that really it is limited at this point, at least in the life of the church and in the language that the church has been using to the practice of homosexuality, and not to the kind of everything that goes along with when people talk about LGBTQ, or whatever kind of letters they're using. Or so we're not at this point talking about gender or gender identity or anything like that. It's really limited to homosexuality. So I just want to kind of put that disclaimer on things that while they are all connected, the way that this has been happening and the discussion has been happening in the global church has been kind of really specific to the practice of homosexuality. So I want to be clear that as of right now, the United Methodist Church has as language in our Book of Discipline, which is our guiding, governing book of how we are structured, what we believe, how we do things, that we do not, if someone is a self-avowed practicing homosexual, according to the Book of Discipline, we should not be ordaining them, nor should we be marrying same-sex couples in the church as clergy or on church property. And that language has been in our Book of Discipline since the 70s. So not since the inception of the United Methodist Church, but for a long time, like 50 years. Since that time, it's been a debate. It's been a question. It's been people who have not agreed with it. And every year at General Conference, or so every 4 years, typically when General Conference meets, it's come up for discussion, it's come up for debate, but it's always come back to that they've kept that language. In the year 2016, we had our last General Conference, and the tensions were rising then, and people wanted to maybe find a way to disagree and still be together. And it just wasn't happening. And so they created a special General Conference that met in 2019 to kind of find a way forward, right? They had a few different proposals in place, and the one that ended up passing basically kept the language as it was, and then created even further restrictions on people who were violating the Book of Discipline. So I should maybe mention that as well a little bit, that since that language has been in there have been um, pastors, churches, conferences that really didn't want to live into that, who, as a matter of conscience, did not agree with that, and so they performed those marriages, ordained homosexual clergy, and we even have had a bishop um, in the Western jurisdiction that is openly gay, all while still having this language in our Book of Discipline. So there's been people, I mean, like I said, the church has really been not on the same page with this for a really long time. 2020 was supposed to be our next general conference. As we all know, that didn't happen. Now general conference has been delayed to 2024. In the meantime, what has happened is that though coming out of 2019, there were some that believed that that was the decision, no more arguments, everyone needs to just fall in line, this is the way it's going to be. That is not what happened. Those that wanted to see homosexual people included in the life of the church and in being able to be married and being ordained, kind of doubled down and said, we're going to work even harder to make this happen. And so those who are more traditional, who want to keep the language in about that homosexuality is not compatible with Christian teaching, decided that maybe it's time to move on. And so they had formed a new denomination called the Global Methodist Church. That launched May 1st of 2022. It is not yet fully functional. They haven't had kind of their initial gathering, but in doing so, it is provided churches that are unhappy with what has been happening in our denomination for a long time, a place to land if they wanted to leave. And so now we have churches that are doing the work of what is called disaffiliation, which means that they will disaffiliate from being United Methodists, that their churches have to go through a process and vote, and then they would be free to be an independent church, to join any other denomination or coalition that would be willing to have them. And in particular, I think a lot of them that are choosing to do this work are leaving to join the Global Methodist Church. On Saturday, so the reason I'm saying all of this now, and you've probably heard some of this in the past, the reason I'm saying all of this now is that on Saturday, our annual conference delegates, so that it would be me, I'm a clergy delegate, I am a member of our annual conference, but also the lay delegates that come from our church. So that's Craig Sherman, Bob Thuey, and Tiffany Bestie. We're headed to Sioux Falls. The Bishop Deb Kesey, who is our interim bishop, has called a special session of our annual conference to handle voting on churches that have gone through the disaffiliation process. And so I want to talk just a little bit about what that is, and then what it is that we're doing on Saturday. So for a while, we've had churches that have been unhappy with things in the United Methodist Church. It doesn't fully align with what they understand their faith to be. And in doing so, they have done things like withhold their apportionments. Apportionments are kind of the covenant that we hold together. It is what we, each local church pays in a portion of what they take in for the ministry that we share together. We are a connectional system. And so we share a lot of ministry together at the conference level and at the global level. And so churches all covenant together And then that pays for our bishops, that pays for our district superintendents and all of the work that they do, pays for it. It also is supporting our shared ministries, like our camping ministries, our Corps, which is like our mission arm, all of the things that kind of support our churches and do that work. But it also goes, apportionments also pay for, we have a lot of small churches in the Dakotas, really small churches that could not afford to have a full-time pastor, or hardly can afford to even have a part-time pastor. And so part of what our apportionments do is help to pay those salaries. We exist, and because we exist and that we are paying in, we are helping some of these other small churches in towns that are not very large have a church otherwise that they would not be able to have on their own. And so again, it's that ministry that we share together. So there's been churches that have chosen not to pay that, churches that have chosen to step away from any of our shared ministries. And that also, I just want to point out, goes against the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline does say that all churches need to be paying their apportionments in full every year, that's part of our covenant together. And so there's really no high horse. Everyone breaks the discipline in some way, shape, or form, it seems. Even though we've all vowed to keep it in its entirety, whether we agree with it or not. And so just putting that out there that everyone has things about it that they don't like, and everyone has things about it they do like, and how we handle that is how we handle that. So anyway, so when the Global Methodist Church formed in May, there were churches that decided, okay, it's time for us to go through the disaffiliation process. We had one church that left our conference prior to that, and that was in Dickinson, North Dakota. At that point, we didn't really have a set in place process, and it was a pretty messy exit. And so at annual conference this past summer, they proposed and kind of ratified basically a disaffiliation process for, this is what churches need to do, this is the expectation, and we're going to treat them all the same. You have to do these things, and this is kind of what you can expect. This is what you need to be covering before you go, that kind of deal. And so we've had 18 churches in our conference that have gone through that process and that are ready to be voted on at annual conference. We have, and also understand that these are churches, not charges, not like a parish. And so sometimes pastors will serve more than one church, or more than one church will go in together to form a charge. If that is the case, each church needs to vote individually whether or not they want to remain UMC, like to choose to disaffiliate or not. So we have 18 churches, but I know that looking at the list, one of them is function as a 3-point charge. So the 3 churches together are served by a part-time pastor. So, some of them are quite small, some of them are some of our larger churches. And so they had to go through a process of doing a membership audit. They had to send a letter to the district superintendent stating why they were seeking disaffiliation. And it had to be related to this 2019 special session of the General Conference, and either leaving based on what was decided there or based on kind of what the response has been since then. And so you can't just leave for any reason under this disaffiliation. In particular, it has to be related to what happened in 2019. And so, yeah, like I said, they have to go through kind of their membership audit. They have to have so many informational meetings, and then they go and they have basically a charge conference, all church vote. And the vote has to pass by 2/3 in order for the disaffiliation to pass. Looking at the 18 churches that have completed that process, it was pretty unanimous for the most part. I think the lowest percentage that it passed was still in the 80s. And so these are churches that are pretty uniform in how they perceive what is happening, and uniform in their vision for the future. That is not United Methodist. So part of the terms then gets determined by our conference trustees. So I want to talk a little bit about that. All of our property for the church is actually held in trust in the conference. So while we might, as a church, buy a parsonage, or that we are paying for the roof of the church or something, the titles and deeds of that is not ours. It is held in trust, and it is held in trust for the sake of the ministry. And so it is up to the conference trustees to set the terms of, what our financial obligations are in our held covenant, and also for the church to leave with its property. At our annual conference this summer, one of the things that kind of came out is that the trustees and the conference chancellors, which are our lawyers, have been doing a lot of work, and basically they came up with a compromise, which means that nobody is really happy with it, but that's kind of just where we're going to be. So what they decided was that for churches that are disaffiliating, and that vote to disaffiliate, that the conference will let them have all of their property for $1. And the $1 has more to do with, it is easier from a legal standpoint to transfer titles, having an amount on there, than because otherwise it's a gift, and that has its own issues. So churches can walk away from the UMC with all of their property for $1. All of their property. So the churches, the land, the parsonages, whatever is included in that. But they also need to be up to date on their apportionments since 2020. 2020 was the year that the conference had to start dipping into reserves because of people withholding apportionments. And so it was determined that you need to be up to date on your apportionments from 2020. If you've paid them this whole time, you don't have to pay them again. But if you have not paid them as part of the covenant, you do need to pay those. And so that is part of what churches need to pay. They also need to pay their pension liability, because churches pay in for pension for the pastors who have served there. And these churches have pastors who are still living, who will probably stay UMC, who they still need to be paying to help support their pension. And so that amount has been figured out. And then they also include a certain percentage of apportionments for the current year. It's not the full amount, but a certain percentage. And so basically, if a church has done that work, as voted to disaffiliate, then the conference does the work of figuring out, okay, what are the terms? What do you still owe to be able to walk away without causing great harm, which goes against, I think, our all held understanding of part of a Christian is to do no harm, and yet still be able to leave. And so what we are voting on Saturday is that agreement, is that resolution, is the figures that have been decided upon, agreed upon. The conference has to vote to say, okay, we approve of this. And then if you meet those requirements, you can disaffiliate. The churches set their own date of disaffiliation. Most of them are setting that when I was looking through the paperwork, most of them have set that date to be kind of the end of this year, the end of December. There's a few that are pushing it into 2023 a little bit. I don't know the reasoning for that. That's kind of an internal church discussion, but churches can choose to set that date. And so that's what we're doing on Saturday. What's interesting is that actually we're not allowed to amend any of those figures, because that is what we have already decided that would be the process, and the process for everybody. But it does need to come to the annual conference. And so that's what we are doing. I will say that this is very hard work and it's very heartbreaking. Um, one of the things I've always loved about the United Methodist Church was that we were what people call a big tent church, and we still are. In that we have people from all different walks of life, all different perspectives, all different political understandings, all different economic and social economic backgrounds, races, nations, all of it, that there is a place for everyone here. When we say that we are open minds, open hearts, open doors, that we really mean that. That however you voted, if you chose to vote or not, whatever your background is, whatever kind of house you grew up in, or if you didn't grow up in one at all, there's a place for everyone here. But it makes it super difficult to truly be a community together because there's so many opportunities for conflict. There's so many opportunities for disagreement. It makes it hard to be unified in the way that we think about things because we are creating space for so many. It's hard work. And I guess for me personally, it saddens me to see people choosing to walk away from the community and covenant that we've had. For me personally, it's hard to see friends walk away who feel that they cannot be in covenant with me anymore. It's hard to see churches that I love dearly that will no longer be United Methodist, churches that have formed me and loved me. And I know that love does not go away, but that shared commitment does. And so there's some just real grief there. If you kind of are wondering where we are in the process of kind of how we're understanding, the leadership team and I have determined that what is best for our church is to not be hasty in making any decisions. It will always be a full church decision. We do not have to make any decisions. Really, it's only if we can determine or we can understand that the majority of the church is so unhappy with the United Methodist Church that they feel that they cannot in good faith any longer be United Methodists. Again, it would have to be well over the majority of the church that we would even consider starting that process, because honestly, if the church is not clear on that vision, that that's where it needs to go, it's a very damaging process. We know that there are going to be people in the churches that are choosing to disaffiliate who did not want to disaffiliate, who have been lifelong United Methodists and want to continue to be. And we will do everything we can to care for those people. And so we are not eager to do anything that's based on what could happen. Instead, we want to look and be responsive to what is happening. And what is happening right now is that General Conference has not happened and will not happen for another 2 years. So in the meantime, nothing has changed. And in our church, we are not going to spend our time and our energy focusing on the fear of what could be, when we can spend our time and our energy focusing on the mission that is before us. What we do know for sure is that God is with us, that God's Spirit is calling us, that we have a purpose and that we have work to do. And our work is not primarily to discern how not to live with one another. Instead, our work is to be unified in Christ's love and to understand that we are not going to all agree on everything, but that doesn't mean that we are not called to be united in the church and united in our need for grace and united in our need for God's love. And so if you are wondering, are we just kicking the can down the road? I don't believe that that's what we're doing. I believe what we're doing is trying to be faithful and focus and build up what God is asking us to do, because our mission has not changed. Our identity has not changed. The church and what it believes has not changed. And so there is no point for us at this time to make a change. There's no reason. And as things progress and move, we will assess them at that time and make the best decisions for the life of this church. If you feel strongly one way or the other, again, please let me know. Talk to the leadership team, but also understand that we will always make choices that are best for the church at large. And at the end of the day, what we care about is making disciples of Jesus Christ, living in a Christian community with one another where we can grow and offer new life to everyone who comes through our doors. And when I say everyone, I really mean that. I want all of you to be an active and wonderful part of this church because you are valued. And I hope that you know that your voice is wanted and it's heard. And it's a lot harder. It is a lot harder to be in a church where not everyone agrees on everything. It's a lot harder to give people space to have their own thoughts and their own ways and to be challenging each other and encouraging one another, but also not to demand uniformity of thought. I don't believe that that's what God intended. What God intended was for us to be bound in love, for us to be bound in our mutual need for grace and forgiveness, to be humble enough to know that none of us have all of the answers, that we are better together than we are on our own, and that our focus should always be what our mission is. And my vision for this church is that we will be a church that continues to love each other, to love our community, to reach those who are in need in our community, to have a positive impact on the lives of our members and those who are impacted by our members. I don't see our mission needing to change anytime soon. I think we have plenty on our plate with what we're doing and what we're focusing on. And so that's where we're headed. That's where we're going. But I wanted you to be aware. I wanted you to know what's going on beyond our local church because we are connected to each other. And again, if you are hearing things, if you are being told things that are confusing for you, that don't make sense, that seem contrary to what I am saying, please come talk to me because I will be as open and honest and transparent as I can. And so with that, hopefully I can be a little more upbeat next week in the podcast, but this is weighing heavy on my heart. And so I wanted to share that and to share my own perspective, and to again let you know my door is always open to you, to all of you. I love all of you. It doesn't matter to me if we don't agree on something or not. I'm going to love you. I'm going to offer God's grace to you. I'm going to do my best to help disciple you. That's what I'm here for. And so with that, God bless. I hope to see you in worship soon. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Wednesday nights at 6:15 or Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. You can also worship with us online at firstumcyankton.org or find us on YouTube.